Nothing works till you do. So yes, if you feel that things are not working out the way you want it to be, it means that you need to work maybe more or maybe in a different way, and see, it will definitely work out. So with that, we start with another important topic of your exams, and that is congenital conditions of the larynx. Now, the congenital conditions can affect the whole of the larynx, and the most common being from above downwards. That is how you have to remember, because it is asked which is the most common congenital condition of the larynx, which is second most common, which is third most common. So this is how you will remember that the most common congenital condition is of the uppermost part of the larynx, and that is the laryngeal inlet. The most common congenital anomaly is of the inlet, and that is what is laryngomalacia. Laryngomalacia. The second most common is of the glottis, and that is vocal cord palsy. Vocal cord palsy. And the third most common is of the subglottis, and that is subglottic stenosis. Subglottic stenosis. Now let us see them and a few more conditions of congenital conditions of the larynx one by one. The vocal cord palsy we have covered in great detail in a separate module of vocal cord palsy, so that we will not be covering in this module. So the most common congenital anomaly of the larynx in children is, in infants is, yes, of the inlet. What is that known as? Laryngomalacia. And since that is the most common anomaly in infants causing stridor, this is also known as congenital laryngeal stridor. It is also known as congenital laryngeal stridor, which means laryngeal stridor, which means if any question is asked in your exam in the name of congenital laryngeal stridor, it is understood that what is being asked is laryngomalacia. Laryngomalacia. And as the name, what's the meaning of malacia? Malacia means soft tissues. Yes. So what happens in laryngomalacia is that it is a condition that affects the inlet of the larynx. So the inlet structures are very soft. They are enlarged, they are soft, they are very floppy. Now let us quickly see how a normal inlet of a child looks like, and then we will see what is the finding that is abnormal that is present in laryngomalacia. So yes, this is how a normal epiglottis, a normal inlet of the child appears. We have the epiglottis here, we have the aryepiglottic folds, and here we have the arytenoid, right? Yes. What will be the finding in laryngomalacia? Yes, just see here. So what are the changes in the inlet? Each and every part of the inlet is involved here. So the epiglottis is enlarged omega shaped. Otherwise also the epiglottis in infants is omega shaped. But here it is very enlarged, curled up, omega shape. Okay, now the aryepiglottic fold, just have a look at aryepiglottic fold. Are you seeing that it is very minute? Yes, so aryepiglottic folds are very short. They are very short and they are very floppy. Short and floppy. And the third part of the inlet is what? The third part is the arytenoid. Just see how huge the arytenoids are. So the arytenoids are also enlarged. Enlarged arytenoids. Yes. So what we are seeing is that the anterior and the posterior part of the inlet, the epiglottis is huge, the arytenoid is huge, and in between the aryepiglottic fold is very short, very floppy. So that makes the inlet very narrow. It makes the inlet very narrow. So now whenever the child inspires, what happens is that this area, because it is very floppy, it goes inside with every inspiration and it blocks the larynx. So this child will have stridor, and the stridor will be during, yes, inspiration. The stridor will be during inspiration. So along with this very narrow inlet, there is excessive redundant tissue, excessive lax tissue in the supraglottis. So there is excessive redundant tissue, lax tissue in the supraglottis. So these are the 4 findings that we need to know. Each one of them we need to know. And if you just remember that the inlet is enlarged and floppy, you will remember each of them because you know what the inlet is. What is the inlet? Inlet is epiglottis, aryepiglottic fold, arytenoid. So yes, epiglottis is large, curled up omega. The aryepiglottic folds are very short and they are very floppy. Arytenoids are huge and large. Lot of redundant tissue in the supraglottis. So whenever the child inspires, all this tissue goes inside. It blocks the larynx and produces stridor stridor. Very good. This stridor will be inspiratory. Okay, so these are the 4 findings. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so now just tell me one more thing. Okay, will this stridor change of position of the child? Will this stridor increase with some position? Will this stridor decrease with some position? Because all this we have already done in the previous module. So whenever you have done one thing, that has to be perfectly clear for you. Yes. So now tell me, will it increase in some position? Yes, we know that the epiglottis is very enlarged here, very floppy here. So whenever the child will lie supine, this epiglottis will fall down further and it will block the inlet. So this stridor will increase in supine position. It will decrease in prone position. Will this child have odynophagia? Will this child have drooling, difficulty in swallowing, painful swallowing? Yes or no? This is just an enlarged epiglottis, just an anatomical abnormality. There is no infection here. So there is no reason why there should be pain. Yes. So it is enlarged, but it will not be swallowing. The movement will not be painful. So there will be no odynophagia. Is that clear? So now let us quickly write this. So yes, this is the most common congenital anomaly in infants, but this need not be present immediately at birth. It is not that the child will be born with inspiratory stridor. The child can have this at birth. Maybe the child presents a little later also, a week or a month after birth also. So this is the most common, the laryngomalacia, also known as congenital laryngeal stridor, and it presents either at birth or a little later, or maybe little later after birth. Okay, and how is the stridor? Now rest of the things you will tell me. You know it is the inlet that is involved, so you tell me everything. Stridor will be, yes, it will be inspiratory. It will worsen on supine. It will worsen on supine. It will disappear in prone position. And also very, very important, whenever the breathing increases, whenever the child is inspiring, what is happening? All this tissue is going inside, blocking the larynx. So whenever the respiration of the child will increase, the stridor will also increase. For example, when does the respiration increases? Yes, whenever the child is playing or when the child is crying. So then also it will increase in playing. When the child is crying, it will increase. And when the child is sleeping, then it will decrease. It will decrease when the child is sleeping. When the respiratory effort is less, then it will decrease in sleeping. And when you make the child lie prone, it totally disappears. And will you see any sign of distress in the child? Will the child be having respiratory distress? No. The child usually has no respiratory distress, no cyanosis. So you will see the mother who has got the child to you. The only concern is that there is a noise when the child breathes. And you see the child is happy, child is playing, child is playful. And the only thing that you notice is that the stridor, whenever the child inspires, there is a noise. Yes, with every inspiration, there is a noise. So when you make this child lie supine in the mother's lap, you will see that the stridor will increase. Still, the child will not be in respiratory distress. And the moment you make him lie prone, it totally disappears. So that gives you a hint that yes, this is laryngomalacia. Yes, so it is totally a non-infective condition. Patient will not have fever. Patient will not be in distress. Patient will not be toxic. The child will be absolutely perfect. Yes. So now, how will you confirm that this is laryngomalacia? Why? Because the parents are worried. We have to, even if the child is not in respiratory distress, that noise is creating a worry in the parent's mind that why is my child, whenever he is breathing, why is there a noise there? Yes, so you need to first confirm that, yes, this is laryngomalacia. How will you confirm? Yes, go for a fiber optic laryngoscopy. What is fiber optic laryngoscopy? The laryngoscopy with the help of endoscope. Yes, either with a flexible endoscope. Yes, usually you go for a flexible endoscopy. So, or you can go for rigid also if it is possible. Usually in infants, you will go for flexible endoscopy. So, you will go for a fiber optic laryngoscopy. And there, how will you confirm? If you see these 4 findings. Quickly tell me the 4 findings. Yes, tell me the 4 findings on examination. Examination you do by a endoscopy. Endoscopy, you confirm that this is by the 4 findings. 4 findings. Quickly tell me what are the 4 findings. First, the epiglottis. Epiglottis is enlarged, curled up, omega shape. Yes, this is your revision. You should be telling this. Yes, quickly. Second, aryepiglottic fold. Short and floppy. Third, arytenoid. Enlarged. Yes, fourth, excessive redundant tissue in the supraglottis. We have already written that. We are not writing that again. Yes. So, you have confirmed that, yes, this is laryngomalacia. What will you do? Now, you will tell the parents that nothing needs to be done. You will just reassure the parents. Why? Because this larynx, this is a developmental anomaly. As this larynx of the child will grow, all this excessive tissue will get taken up and the stridor will disappear. Usually by 2 years of age, the stridor disappears. So the prognosis of this condition is very good. You do not need to do anything. Just tell the parents that this is some abnormality, minor abnormality of the larynx, and it will disappear. You don't need to worry about it at all. Yes, so management is conservative. Conservative disappears by 2 years. Disappears by 2 years of age. And just in case if it does not disappear, or if the child is having so much of lax tissue that everything is blocking the respiration and that is interfering with the child's life, then in that case we can reduce this excessive tissue, and that is by the surgery which is known as supraglottoplasty. Plastic repair of the supraglottic structures. Supraglottoplasty. Okay, if by chance required, if no benefit, if it does not resolve, then you can go for supraglottoplasty. Supraglottoplasty. So since this is the most common congenital anomaly of the larynx, if you go to the ENT OPD, you will definitely, if you have gone in your posting continuously, you will definitely find one child who would have come with this condition. So if your mind knows, your eyes will see and you will be able to diagnose. Yes. So playful child, just with inspiratory stridor. No difficulty in swallowing. In the question, it is just given inspiratory stridor with normal cry, no dysphagia, no drooling, nothing has been mentioned. Yes, then you have to think of laryngomalacia. So the next congenital anomaly that we are going to do here, I told you vocal cord palsy, we'll see later on. So what's the third most common congenital anomaly of the larynx? Yes, that is of the third part. Supraglottic, glottic, subglottic. So that is subglottic stenosis. Yes. So subglottic stenosis can be present congenitally. It is the third most common congenital anomaly of the larynx. Subglottic stenosis. Subglottic stenosis. So normally the subglottic diameter in a full term, is usually more than 4 millimeters. So if it is less than or equal to 4 millimeters in full term, or in preterm, if it is less than 3 millimeters, then we call it as a congenital subglottic stenosis. Subglottic stenosis. Now subglottic stenosis can also be acquired. And it is very difficult to distinguish whenever the child is having a subglottic stenosis, whether it is a congenital or it is acquired. Acquired means how can a child acquire a stenosis in the subglottic area? What do you think? How can the subglottic area be stenosed? Yes, what is the subglottis formed by? Which cartilage? Yes, the cricoid, which is the only complete ring cartilage, signet ring cartilage of the larynx. Yes, the cricoid. So cricoid is complete ring all around. There is no space for expansion if there is any injury here. And in an infant, how can the injury in the subglottic area occur by? Yes, it can occur because of prolonged intubation. Because of prolonged intubation in the background of acute respiratory distress syndrome. That happens very commonly in premature infants. So premature infant who is developed a acute respiratory distress syndrome and has been intubated for a prolonged period of more than 3 weeks. What happens is in the cricoid area, the intubation tube is going. The cuff of the intubation tube is at the level of the cricoid. That is usually where the cuff is. Have you intubated any patient? When you must have intubated, or if you have seen somebody intubating also, you will see that you can see the cuff just below the vocal cord. What is that area? That is the subglottic area. That is the level of the cricoid. So what happens if there is a continuous pressure of the cuff of this area in the cricoid? What happens is pressure necrosis. Later on, when this will heal, what will happen is that there will be fibrosis, and cricoid is the only complete ring cartilage. If there is fibrosis, there is no space for expansion. It will ultimately result in stenosis, and then the child later on might come with stridor. So then you will not come to know that whether it was a congenital or whether it was acquired does not matter also. Why? Because the management will remain the same if it is stenosis, if it's a permanent stenosis, a mature stenosis that has occurred. So yes, what is important for us to note here is that if any child we know who has to be subjected to intubation for a prolonged period, For after 2 to 3 weeks, shift the child from intubation to tracheostomy. Why tracheostomy? Why tracheostomy? Yes, because here we have the larynx going down to the trachea. The intubation tube cuff lies at the level of the cricoid. Whereas a tracheostomy, where do you do the tracheostomy? You do the tracheostomy in the trachea that is lower down. They are C-shaped. So here the chance of stenosis is not there. So that is why any child whom you are subjecting to intubation for more than 2 to 3 weeks, always shift to tracheostomy. In fact, tracheostomy, one of the most common cause in infants for doing a tracheostomy is acute respiratory distress syndrome. So yes, what we know is that if it is congenital, that is not in our hands. But something is preventable, that is in our hand. That is not to give any child acquired subglottic stenosis. And this is a very, very bad thing to give any child because the management of this area is very difficult, because this complete ring, you cut that area, again there will be fibrosis. Yes, so always take care of that. You are the ones who will be going to the wards, who will be going to the ICUs, you will be seeing tracheostomy, you will be seeing intubated patients, so you have to keep this in mind. Yes, so the definition of subglottic stenosis I have already told you. It is less than, how much in a full term? Less than or equal to 4 millimeters, and in preterm less than 3 millimeters, that we have already written. Most common cause of acquired is prolonged intubation. Prolonged intubation, and it can be prevented by shift to tracheostomy. Shift to tracheostomy after 2 to 3 weeks. After 2 to 3 weeks, if you have to prolong the intubation, shift to tracheostomy. And always, that is why any patient, any child who comes with, what will be the stridor if it is subglottic stenosis, subglottic involvement? Yes, biphasic stridor. So if here is a child who has come with biphasic stridor, what? No other voice is normal. There is no difficulty. Any difficulty in swallowing? No difficulty in swallowing. Yes, so the child has only one thing, and that is biphasic stridor. So what comes to your mind? Subglottic stenosis. Always take the history of intubation. Yes, so always take the history of prolonged intubation. Yes, and then when the child has come to you with biphasic stridor, you know that this can be subglottic stenosis. You want to confirm that this subglottic stenosis. How do you confirm? Yes, that is by rigid endoscopy. So you go for a rigid endoscopy, bronchoscopy, rigid endoscopy. Yes, rigid endoscopy. And you will be able to see the subglottic area, which is narrowed, and it can be a little narrow, it can be very much narrow, it can be completely blocked. So there can be different grades of subglottic stenosis, and the management depends upon the grade of stenosis. So yes, the grades of subglottic stenosis is what you need to know. They have been classified by Mayer and Cotton, and that has been known as a Mayer-Cotton classification of, or grading system of subglottic stenosis. Yeah, and yes, that is a question of your exam, that Mayer-Cotton grading system is a grading system for what? For subglottic stenosis. So the grade 1 is up till 50% obstruction. Okay, from no obstruction to up till 50% is grade 1. From 50 to 70% is grade 2, and up till 99%, 71 to 99% means almost complete. Nothing, only 99% is grade 3. No lumen at all is grade 4. No lumen is grade 4, as you can see here. So how will be the management? I told you management is according to the grade. So grade 1 usually no management is required. They are okay unless and until there is some infection and there is croup and they develop stridor. If you just manage the croup also, the child will be okay after that. Yes. In grade 2 and early grade 3, what is done is this cricoid. Okay, so this is the cricoid. Now we want to, it is stenosis. See, we want to enlarge it. So what we do is that we cut open the cricoid. Okay, we cut it open. Anteriorly, we put a graft, and this is most commonly a costal cartilage graft. A costal cartilage graft, and posteriorly we split the cricoid. Can you see? So we are giving it some space for expansion. And in grade 3 late plus grade 4, what we do is, instead of only anterior graft, we also give a posterior graft. So we put a graft anteriorly as well as a posteriorly. So we put anterior as well as posterior graft, and sometimes if this also does not work, then in that case we can go for a cricotracheal resection of the part that is completely stenosed. So that segment is excised and the free ends are then anastomosed. So what can be done is a cricotracheal resection. Tracheal resection can be done for grade 4 also. For grade 4 also. And sometimes if by chance you have diagnosed the stenosis very early, by chance you have given the patient a child who was in ARDS and you have intubated the child and for more than 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 1 month, maybe 1.5 months, and the moment you remove and what you see is the child goes into stridor. The child is perfect, the lungs are perfect, everything is perfect, and the child is in stridor now. Yes, so that is when you have to think that maybe the child has developed stenosis. So if it is an early and immature stenosis, in that case, you can just go for balloon dilatation also. Yes, so in early and immature, best is but not to let it happen. Yes, but if at all it has happened and early and immature, which means that the tissues are still, they are flexible. So in that case, you can go for balloon dilatation. Balloon dilatation. Now, are you noticing that in stenosis, what is the area that is stenosed? Cricoid. When we are operating on which area? That is the cricoid. Yes. So, what will happen after you have operated? Healing will occur, and healing occurs by fibrosis. So, again, there will be restenosis. Yes, so whenever we are operating in this area, it is mandatory to use some drug to reduce sinus K formation. Yes, you will tell me that drug. What is that? Yes, that is mitomycin C. So, yes, that was a question of your exam last time, and it has been asked so many number of times that which is the drug that you use. Yes, mitomycin C. You use mitomycin C. Mitomycin C, and also what you do is once you have operated it, you put a stent there. How is the stent? This stent is like this. Okay, so this part will go inside. This part, as you can see here, yes, this is going inside the lumen of the subglottis and the trachea, and it will give support and it will not allow the stenosis to recur immediately following surgery. And this part is used as a tracheostomy, from where the patient will breathe. This is what is known as Montgomery tube. Montgomery tube. So this is something that is asked sometimes, that Montgomery tube is used following, yes, for post laryngotracheal stenosis. When you have operated on the stenosis, you put this tube for stenting as well as for respiration. So now will you always remember that any child who is on intubation for more than how much? Yes, has to be on intubation for more than 2 to 3 weeks. You will shift the intubation to tracheostomy. Prolonged intubation will lead to which condition of the larynx? Subglottic stenosis. The subglottic stenosis is at what site? Yes, at cricoid. To prevent restenosis, which is the drug that is used? Mitomycin C. Now we have another congenital anomaly of the larynx, and that is this. Can you make out what has happened here? Yes, we can see a web. Can you see a web at the level of the glottis in between the two vocal cords? Yes, so this is what is known as laryngeal web. And this occurs because of incomplete recanalization of the larynx during development. During development, when the inlet and the cavity is being formed, so the canalization is not complete. That leads to the web, and the most common site of web is at the level of the glottis. Which part of the glottis? Again, the anterior part of the glottis. Okay, so this is what I have told you. Now you will tell me rest of the thing. Tell me, if there is a web here, will the voice be affected? Yes or no? Yes, voice will be affected. It will be a very weak cry. Weak cry. The vocal cords are not adducting in midline. The pressure is not able to build up. Yes, why? Because the web is keeping the vocal cords apart. The mother will come to you with the complaint that I'm not able to hear when the child is crying. It is such a weak cry. There can be aphonia also if it is a lot of web. Yes, can there be respiratory distress? Can there be stridor? Yes or no? Yes. What type of stridor? Either inspiratory or biphasic. Okay, so now we will write this. So here, this is what is laryngeal web, and the cause is incomplete recanalization, and the most common site is the anterior glottis. And how is the cry of the child? It is a very weak cry. The stridor, inspiratory, or it is biphasic. Biphasic. And again, all this diagnosis has to be made by only on inspection of the larynx. You'll be able to see that yes, there is a web. So you can diagnose it by inspection, by an endoscopy. And how will you manage it? Yes, that seems simple. Cut the web. Cut the web. Yes, so you can excise this web. Excise it either with a knife or you can excise it with a laser. Yes, the laser used most commonly in ENT is carbon dioxide laser. So you will excise it either with laser or with knife, but there is one problem here. See, when you have excised it, see, okay, you have cut it, you have excised it. So what? There is a raw surface here also, there is a raw surface here also. So now after the surgery, it is a child, no? It is an infant. You cannot ask the child, don't cry. Adults you can tell, do voice rest, don't speak. Yes, because the vocal cords during speaking or during crying, they will adapt. So now you cannot tell the child, don't cry. The child will cry. Now the vocal cords will meet in midline, and again, because they are raw on both the surfaces, what will happen? Adhesions can form again. So what we do is to prevent adhesion following surgery, we put a keel here. Yes, just see how this keel looks like. It is like this. So this will come in between the two vocal cords. Like this, we will have the two vocal cords. One will be here and the other will be on this side. In between will come like this. So this is a keel. It is put in between the two vocal cords. It will stay there for around 2 weeks. We will keep it there. During this time, the epithelial healing, all that will occur, and after that we can remove it. So this keel has to be put for around 2 weeks. 2 weeks time. Yes. So now here, if this is the child, can you make out what this is? Yes, we can see some red on the face of the child. What is this? Hemangioma. Yes. So if this child comes to you with stridor, with biphasic stridor, what will you think of? Yes, this can be a subglottic hemangioma. A hemangioma, usually we know if any child has hemangioma, then the hemangioma is not necessarily only of one place. They can have hemangioma in multiple areas. So if this child comes with a biphasic stridor, hemangioma most commonly if in the larynx is seen in the subglottic area. So subglottic hemangioma needs to be ruled out. So how will you rule it out? Again by endoscopic examination. You will do endoscopic examination, and what you will see is, yes, you will see hemangioma where in the subglottic, and the biphasic stridor will also tell you that yes, this is subglottic hemangioma. So yes, you will see a hemangioma. Maybe it is localized on one part of the subglottis, or it can be a huge hemangioma as you can see. Yes, covering so much. So this child will have a lot of stridor, lot of respiratory distress. So what can be done here? How will you manage this? We know that hemangiomas usually undergo involution. By usually 5 years, they will undergo involution. But if by chance in that time the child is in a lot of respiratory distress and the hemangioma is growing, then what we can do? Earlier what used to be done was they used to be excised by laser. Yes, but laser is something that too much of laser, the whole of the subglottic area, if it is involved, too much of laser we do not want to use because that will lead to scarring. In a child, we do not want so much of scarring. So then what we do is, nowadays, what is done is we give propranolol. Yes, you must be thinking propranolol in hemangioma. Yes, it has been seen that it works wonders for hemangioma. It reduces the size and there is no need for surgery also. So the main management nowadays is the first line. First line is propranolol. Now in patients who do not respond well to propranolol, then in them we can go for steroids. Steroids injection can be given, and still who do not respond, then in them the resection, the submucous resection below the mucus, this hemangioma needs to be excised. So submucous resection can be done, and for resection what you do is usually you have to open the larynx completely. How do we open the larynx? So here we have the thyroid cartilage like this. Yes, so what we do is we cut the thyroid cartilage from the middle, from the middle so that we do not have to damage the vocal cords, and then we open the larynx and we can go for an excision of the hemangioma. This procedure of giving an incision in the center and opening the larynx, that is what is known as laryngofissure. Fissuring the larynx completely from the center, laryngofissure. So this can be done. And earlier carbon dioxide laser used to be used. Sometimes it can be used for small hemangioma, but if it is a large hemangioma, then better do not use it. So, and when the medical management is working, why go for any other management? So excision can be done by laryngofissure, and they undergo involution. They usually can disappear by 5 years. So if they have not involuted, then again the management remains the same. And if they are early but they are causing problem, again we have to manage them. So, okay, can you tell me, if there is a hemangioma in the larynx, the most common site of an hemangioma of the larynx is? Yes, it is a subglottic hemangioma. And subglottic hemangioma, can you present with stridor? What will be the type of stridor? Yes, it will be a biphasic stridor. So now coming to a very, very important condition of the larynx, that is in children, and that is what is laryngeal papillomatosis. Laryngeal papillomatosis. It is also known as recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. Yes, and this is not congenital, but we are doing it here because if any infant with stridor and all this is mentioned, then this is one DD that you have to keep there. This is actually acquired. This is acquired, and this can be seen in infants also. It can be seen in adults also. Recurrent respiratory papillomatosis or laryngeal papillomatosis can be seen in both. It has bimodal age occurrence. It can be seen in infants. It can be seen in adults. We know that the name itself tells us that laryngeal papillomatosis. So yes, it is caused by human papillomavirus. So if it is caused by human papillomavirus in adults, yes, it is acquired by the sexual behavior. But in children, in infants, how are they going to acquire it? This is a condition that is asked very, very commonly in your exams. So how is an infant going to acquire it? Yes, very good. Through the birth canal from the mother, which means always what history will be present? Yes, in juvenile laryngeal papillomatosis, that is seen in infants, always the laryngeal papillomatosis that is seen in infants is known as juvenile laryngeal papillomatosis. Always a history of what delivery will be mentioned? Vaginal delivery will be mentioned. A vaginal delivery will be mentioned. And here what happens as the name? Papillomatosis. So there are multiple papillomas. And these papillomas, they start at the level of the true vocal cord. There are multiple papillomas of the true vocal cord. Do you then wonder that if this is a infection by human papillomavirus, the child has acquired it through the mother's birth canal through inhalation, why are we seeing it at the level of the glottis, true vocal cord? Why not anywhere else is it starting? So these lesions, these papillomas have a predilection to grow in the areas of squamociliary junction. Squamociliary junction. What does this mean? Ciliary junction. Junction of squamous epithelium from ciliated columnar epithelium. Is the vocal cord a site? What is the lining epithelium of the vocal cord? Quickly tell me. Yes, stratified squamous non-keratinized. Rest of the larynx is lined by ciliated columnar pseudostratified. So where this junction is, that is the most common site of origin of this. So that is why this is not localized only to the larynx. The other places, what is the lining epithelium of the nasopharynx? Ciliated columnar. Rest everywhere in the pharynx, it is stratified squamous, non-keratinized. So again, at the junction of the nasopharynx, oropharynx, inside the nose, at the junction of the squamo and the ciliated columnar epithelium, everywhere they can occur. Is that clear? Now, before we write down something more on all these things that we have done about laryngeal papillomatosis, I want you to tell me a few things. Okay, I have told you so many things about this. How does the child acquire this? What is the organism causing this? Where it starts? You tell me, how will this child present with? What will be the complaint that will make you think in the question, what is given that will make you think that yes, this child is a patient of juvenile laryngeal papillomatosis? Yes, we know that if it is vocal cord, what will be the presentation? Yes, there will be hoarseness. What will be given? There will be given vaginal delivery, child with full term or whatever. Yes, there is a vaginal delivery, and following that, or there can be prolonged second stage of labor, means there is more contact with the mother's birth canal. Yes, and following that, child has hoarseness. And maybe later on there will be stridor. Okay, so always there will be hoarseness first. Later on, when the papillomas grow further, there will be stridor. So vaginal delivery, hoarseness, stridor. This will be the order. Yes. So yes, what is laryngeal papillomatosis? The cause is human papillomavirus. The strains that have been implicated here are 6 and 11. Again, it has been asked in your exam, which is more virulent. The 11 is more virulent. Yes, it has bimodal age occurrence. Bimodal age occurrence in the children, it acquires through vaginal delivery through the mother. And in adult, the difference between adult and a child papilloma is that in children it is multiple, whereas in adults it is usually single. Okay, it is single, but this does not give an advantage to the adult. Why? Because if we talk about whether laryngeal papillomatosis is pre-malignant or not, yes, it is pre-malignant. And which is more pre-malignant, adult or child? Adult is more pre-malignant. Can you think of it? Why adult will be more pre-malignant? Adults have the history of smoking. Yes, that is a cause that can turn pre-malignant things into malignancy. In adults, there can be radiation given to the neck. So post-radiation, the chance of malignancy increases. So pre-malignant is more in adult. It is more following radiation, following radiotherapy to the neck for any other cause. So, but in child, yes, in child they are multiple, so they can cause problems, like they can cause hoarseness. Later on, when they grow, they can cause stridor. So yes, when they grow, this is the typical appearance. Multiple papillomas you will see at the site of the true vocal cord, at the site of the junction of the squamous and the ciliated epithelium. And the presenting complaint is hoarseness. And later on, the child will have stridor. So how will you diagnose? You will diagnose it by endoscopy. Endoscopy, you can go for a biopsy and just see here, completely filled. Yes, this child has come to you in stridor. What should we do? Should we immediately do a tracheostomy? Life of child will be saved. Should we do a tracheostomy? No. Why not? Yes, immediately take up the child for excision of the papillomas. Tracheostomy should not be done. Why not? Yes, when you're doing a tracheostomy, are you not creating another junction of the squamous epithelium with the ciliated epithelium of the trachea? Yes, so that is why tracheostomy is not done here. You take up the child for excision. And how do you excise? Tracheostomy is not done. And how do you excise it? Preferably by microdebrider. Microdebrider. You've seen a microdebrider, no? I showed you. Yes, I showed you when in the tonsils, I showed you in the adenoid how it was removing. What exactly is this? It is an instrument which has rotating blades, just like something like a shaver. It quickly rotates and it eats up all the tissues. So in no time can all this tissue be removed and the airway can be maintained. The airway can be made patent. Now, earlier, laser used to be used. Carbon dioxide laser used to be used for the excision in early days. But nowadays, the best management is microdebrider. Why not carbon dioxide laser? I told you that another name for laryngeal papillomatosis is recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. Yes, they are recurrent, and they definitely recur. What we are doing by excising is we are just making the airway patent. Yes, so when they recur, the child will require repeated excision. And if we are repeatedly exposing the larynx of the child to laser, it is filling the whole of the larynx. So what we are doing is we are burning in laser, we are burning the supraglottic area, everywhere where this papillomas are, of the glottis, of the subglottis. Yes, so we will be creating scarring. That will affect the voice of the child for life. That can give the child stenosis of the subglottic area when fibrosis occurs and healing occurs. So that is why nowadays the best mode of management is excision by microdebrider. Though other modes, if it is not available, then laser can be used, but usually it has to be avoided. Laser, carbon dioxide laser was used earlier. Nowadays first is microdebrider. And recurrence is present, very, very common recurrence. And so that is why what we have done by removing is we have made the airway patent. Now we also want to decrease the chance of recurrence. So to decrease the chance of recurrence in the post-operative period, we give ABC. Okay. So what is ABC? A is ABC. A is alpha interferon. That is an immunomodulator. B is bevacizumab. What is this? Yes, this is a monoclonal antibody. This reduces angiogenesis, the blood supply it reduces angiogenesis, new blood formation it reduces in the tumor. Angiogenesis. And C is the antiviral cidofovir. This is given intralesional. It is given inside the areas where we are excising it from. We instill the cidofovir there. So it is intralesional. So this is what we give in the post-operative period to decrease the chances of recurrence. And yes, can this be prevented? Yes. How can it be prevented? How is the child getting it? Through mother's vaginal birth canal. So how can it be prevented? Yes, by vaccination of the mother. Yes, what are the vaccination that you give? Mother's vaccination. What vaccination? Yes, you can give Cervarix. You can give Gardasil 9. Yes. So each and every point of this condition, juvenile laryngeal papillomatosis, recurrent laryngeal papillomatosis, is a question of your exam. It has been repeatedly asked. So quickly tell me it is caused by. It is caused by human papilloma virus. Which strains? 6 and 11. Most virulent strain is 11. Where do they start? Yes, they start from the true vocal cord. So the presenting feature is hoarseness. Later on there can be stridor. How has the child acquired it? Yes, through vaginal delivery, through mother's birth canal, through the birth canal. And is it premalignant? Yes or no? Yes. Which is more premalignant, adult or child or juvenile? Yes. So the more premalignant is the adult variant. It is more premalignant. What is the management of these papillomas? Excision to maintain the airway, and then we give something to decrease the chance of recurrence. What do we give in the post-operative period to decrease the chance of recurrence? ABC. What is A? Alpha interferon. B. Bevacizumab. C. Cidofovir. Cidofovir, how do we give? Yes, we give it intralesional injection of cidofovir. And what is the mode of excision usually preferred? Yes, it is microdebrider. Most common congenital anomaly of the larynx in children is laryngomalacia. Congenital laryngeal stridor is managed by. Yes, that is laryngomalacia. Laryngomalacia is managed by conservative management. It usually disappears by 2 years of age. What is the third most common congenital anomaly of the larynx? Subglottic stenosis is graded by which system? Mayer's Gottin classification. And what is the drug that is used to reduce Haneke formation? Yes, it is mitomycin C. And what is the most common cause of acquired subglottic stenosis? Acquired is prolonged intubation. Any child who is to be intubated for more than 2 to 3 weeks should be shifted to tracheostomy. What's the most common site of laryngeal web? Glottis, anterior or posterior? Yes, anterior glottis. What's the management of laryngeal web? Excision, and after that, yes, you put a keel there. What is the most common cause of laryngeal papillomatosis? Human papilloma virus, which is more virulent? 11. The 11 is more virulent. And they start at what level? Yes, they start at the level of true vocal cord. So the presenting feature is hoarseness. Later on, they present with stridor. Always a history of what is present there? Is history of vaginal delivery. So that is what you need to know in congenital conditions of the larynx.